Alrighty. Good evening. Sorry for that short delay. Welcome to Nikos RPG. This is Jonathan Albin, your host, and tonight on Opening Salvo, we're going to talk about the how-to guide on how to be happy. I know that this is an issue that is sensitive to some people because they have perhaps never felt or experienced what happiness is, or they feel that it's a unattainable objective, or that it's literally a matter of faking it that people will sometimes claim in terms of those who are happy. And I'm here to tell you that number one, happiness is attainable, and it has nothing to do with your income, your background, or anything. And we're going to talk today not only about how to be happy, but also the merits of choosing this lifestyle. Now, I've been a game master for 50 years. I learned how to play role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons in particular, from a friend of mine who was, his name was Dave Arneson, and he was my buddy's Grandpa Dave. And as an 11-year-old, I was, the younger side of people that were playing role play games at that time, and I never stopped. I started in 1973, 74 time frame before the game even was published, and have played it nonstop, an average of one time per week for the entirety of that framework. As a matter of fact, during COVID, I was running 9 sessions a week contemporaneously and continuously for the entirety of that period. And since then, I'm averaging about 6 or 7 campaigns at the same time. So I'm going to be making the case that happiness is a state of being. It's a continuous and continual process to maintain happiness, but that the idea behind it is that our existence we can choose to be happy regardless of our situation and conditions. And those of you that are familiar with the Nikos lore would certainly see how I could encapsulate that in the concept of the orange veil. The various veils, of course, representing different cultures and concepts and philosophies of survival. But happiness as a state of being really is a decision made in advance and then supported by the efforts required to maintain it. As such, therefore, the purpose for a video like this is not only to share what it is or even what it might take, but specifically to say how to accomplish that. So the first thing we have to realize is that when we are saying that happiness is a state of being, it's a state of mind. It's a position that we put our brain in so that it can receive the stimulus that the world provides in a way that supports this philosophy, this decision-making process. Having said that, of course, there are those out there in the world that when they see that concept, they immediately say, well, yes, you can be emotionally charged and be excited about the condition itself and thereby hold on to an emotional state for a period of time. But it certainly can't be continuous, and it certainly can't be every day. And to a lesser extent, that's true. What I mean by that is that the decision to be a happy person does mean that you are going to have days when you aren't able to support that or aren't able to hold that emotion together. And that's the reason why what we're really talking about is the concept of imagination. Well, as soon as you say that, there are those who would say if you're holding on to a false happiness because you're imagining what it would be like to be happy, then you're actually fooling yourself and not achieving success. And my real question to that, of course, is whether I am being happy or whether I'm only imagining being happy. If the outward experience of it is joy, how is that not being happy? Yes, so therefore we are talking about the concept of this continuous state of being an effort put forth by our imagination. And that's why a lot of times when I speak to audiences and such, I talk about the active imagination, not just the passive envisioning of things to meet the parameters of daydreaming or uh, carrying forth a visualization process, but actually to become engaged in the state of happiness by way of imaginative control. And this is where we have to talk about the power of the mind. I do know that there are 1,000, maybe 1,000,000, who knows, tens of millions of people who advocate for visualization or mindfulness. And when they do so, they are speaking of the power of the mind. And we experience the power of the mind all the time, whether it be holding on to an idea, remembering a phone number, convincing somebody to change their course because of the fact that we've convinced them. Maybe even using arguably cheat codes like neurologistic programming, we can affect the status of other people's emotional state or their condition in thought by the power of our own mind. And when we talk about this in terms of imagination, it really comes down to what are we able to utilize our imagination for? Are we building a process? The very idea of invoking the power of the mind is to say there is something here that has an effect on the world around us and our status and our interaction with humanity. And all of these are going to be evidenced by our success or failure at accomplishing that which we are attempting. So when I speak of how you, where you are right now, changing your condition, it really depends on you taking control of the power of your own mind and utilizing discipline and exercises and situational structures in order to take control of this technically unbridled and unlimited power. A person can put their mind to tasks and do incredible things, and this is evidenced day after day in the lives of certain individuals, and the level of success to which they attain really depends on their ability to maintain with discipline their mindset, their status of being. So then the question becomes, as I'm doing this video, am I doing this to present a message, or am I only exercising the mechanics of human interaction, and am I going to have any effect? Well, I know that my intent is to improve your game sessions when you are a storyteller, to improve your interaction with other individuals when you communicate, and most important, to exercise and discipline your mind to gain maximum outcome from your active imagination. And therefore, I guess you would have to say that this is more about mechanics than it is about message, because everybody out there is going to tell you, I've got a solution, I've got a secret, I've got a mechanism. And the very way the audience on YouTube responds is to knee-jerk respond to catchphrases and key messages and keywords. And perhaps that'll be the case in this case. Perhaps you're watching this video simply because of one of the keywords that I put into the background of my message got to you. Or perhaps you were actually looking for a way to find happiness. And so while I've been talking again of the way to do it without talking about the mechanics of it, let me say first and foremost that the desire to be happy is intrinsic with all of us. Every human being wants to be happy. We want to feel that euphoria. And there are people who have biological situations that interfere with that, and I unfortunately can't address those. But what I can say is that our intention is important, and the idea of the mechanics of creative activation is literally just that. It's the idea of taking your intent and putting it into practice. And the way we do that is we begin to create for ourselves the framework of what that visualized looks like, what it is that our heart and our mind are wishing or desiring, and to figure out ways to make those things into realities. All of that leads us to the irony of the fun learning paradox. And let me explain this a little bit. The process of learning anything is directly associated with the concepts of play, the very mechanisms by which we determine possible outcomes are themselves part of the enjoyable process of learning. And I have to make sure that I separate this. I'm not talking about just the sheer joy of the action, which of course there is some of that, but the idea that our brains are wired to seek problems that we can solve. And we're looking for the endorphin high, whatever you want to call it, the serotonin levels that go through the roof and such, when we are grinding away at a problem. Our brains are rewarding us for that very attempt. The irony is that we actually derive less in the terms of serotonin and stuff when we actually achieve this level. And I think that's where when I speak of the discipline of the power of the mind, that's really what we have to hold on to. And that is to recognize that the achievement of this impossible, this place where our brain is feeding us the joy, the thrill, the excitement that we're looking for, really comes down to staying, ironically, behind the curve. Having said that, I realize how insane that sounds, but the idea is that if you achieve, even for a moment, the success that you are attempting to attain, your brain literally shuts off the flow of serotonin because it's no longer working on the problem. The problem's been solved. And so I know that in my case, that's been the reality of it. I've been working on Nikos RPG for the better part of 4 years. I've talked about the fact that I published it more than 2 years ago, and that's true. We did publish the original Nikos RPG Dark Shards book just over 2 years ago. And the reality is that I had let my brain consider that to be mission accomplished. And so therefore, with that, the energy level dropped off and my ability to express my progression of the other properties within the brand kind of failed. And so now we're looking at it from a slightly different aspect. And that is, I want to help you have as much fun in your life as I've had in mine and will have in the future. But in the process, I want you to learn the mechanism of how to hold on to that discipline so that it does not lose its momentum. And the best thing I can do to provide that is to allow you to realize that the process of becoming, the process of expanding and developing and expressing ourselves is the important part. And the accomplishments that are derived along the way are actually byproducts, and we shouldn't be concerned with their advancement quite as much as we are the very process of helping others to achieve it. And to that end, I want to make it clear that the Nikos RPG mechanism, which I intend to send to a Kickstarter in the next year or so, depending on how much my audience grows, is going to be a process that only is a sidelight from what I'm really doing. And so when I do my Nikos updates, especially my in-game updates, I'm really doing the primary service to my players, because that's really what it's about, is building the communication, building the striving and the mechanism, so that there is no end game. There is no place where the story, if you will, ends. And we'll be talking more about that as time goes by. Alrighty, so I've made it evident that it is a matter of our imagination that makes it possible for us to have happiness. And how is that the case? Well, our imagination is that portion of our creative internalization that allows us to make the actions in our real life make sense. It isn't that I am happy because my game sessions are holding. It's that I am happy that my players are engaging with the world in such a way that they are experiencing the very same development, the same joys that I would want to derive. So you've got to really, when it comes down to it, you have to play to your audience in ways that the players experience that joy. And that, it takes some time to get there. I've been GMing, as I said, for 50 years, and not everything that we propose or not everything that we present to our audiences will suit what they're actually looking for. For example, this show is being put in the Just Chatting channel rather than the role-playing game session, because who I'm really trying to reach out to are those of you that have not played role-playing games in the last decade, or maybe have never experienced a role-play game, and to show how you've really already been doing it for decades and you didn't even realize it, and therefore help you to squeeze, to draw as much enjoyment out of the experience as possible, and at the same time help you to develop the mechanisms so that your own imagination can become activated again, and you can live in that creative space that we all were born with and that we have held on to for this long, and yet we have sort of put the dampers on because we're afraid of it, or we're concerned with what the open liberty and freedom of it would do, and we're not even sure whether that is the pathway to enlightenment, to creative energy, and to success. So let me be clear. The idea of creative imagination is not the idea of creating illusion. There are a lot of people out there that use phrases like fake it till you make it, or, no pain, no gain. And the idea is that somehow you can create a false sense of achievement that will eventually spawn actual feelings of achievement. And that's really the opposite of what we're wanting to do. When we are talking about creative activation of your imagination, what we are talking about is taking the pieces of our lives that bring us joy and folding them into the experiences that we do for other means. For example, for creating income, for reaching new communities, for social interaction, for belonging, and so on. We want to make that something that can be manifested by our actions and our will, our decision. And this may feel, especially for a person that hasn't experienced much of it, it will feel almost like the illusion that you're pretending. But the reality here is that we are developing the realization that activity and creativity are directly responding to our playfulness and our interaction with other people. And with that knowledge, then we can amplify the effect and create a more tangible response for ourselves, our manifestation of the things that we want out of life can become more real because we have shared it with other people and made it a cornerstone for our very existence. And in a lot of ways, this has to do with our ability to externalize what it is we want so that others will see how it's going to be helpful to them for them to achieve it as well. So, for example, if you're watching this video and you are aware of how much you need affirmation, creativity, imaginative output, then you have to realize how much you have to generate that from your own standpoint, because there's no way that the things that I do, the thoughts that I have, can change your world unless you are willing to take down the barriers that have prevented you from making those adjustments. Now, this episode is not an indicator of all the things that we might accomplish. As a matter of fact, this is just a scratch on the surface, because the idea of happiness is something that's internal and attainable and maintainable if we only give the effort of our creativity to it. So I'm going to ask you to do a couple things of faith. And the first one is to subscribe to this channel so you know when all the other videos are coming out. And I'd really ask you to watch the entire series of episodes in the Game Masters Academy, because those concepts of establishing a firm and consistent reality in a fictional setting are really just the frameworks that we need to establish the same frameworks in reality, in our time and space. We don't accomplish this by just wishing. We do this in terms of making it tangible, making it real, feeling its third and fourth dimension, how it is a part of who we are and what we want to accomplish. And by doing this, we give ourselves the power to overcome merely by acknowledging that the things that need to be overcome have already been overcome by tens of thousands of people before us, and the only thing is for us to follow the process. And I know that sounds cliche and it sounds reductive, and I suppose in some fashions it could be considered so. But the reality is that I'm a happy person. I've held on to this happiness despite the loss of my daughter in 1997 in a car crash, the loss of my marriage 5 to 6 years after that, the trials and tribulations of moving as many times as I have, and the ups and downs of life are ebbs and flows, but the regulation to our lives can be our happiness level, because despite all of the ups and downs and horrors and terrors of my life, I have been generally mostly a happy person, and I can attribute that directly to the dedicated work that I've done on my own creativity and imagination to hold those in high regard, and seeing the outcome from those activities in a tangible way really helps to build a framework by which one can be happy. I want to thank you for being with me for this episode. I know that it's relatively short at just under half an hour, but I do that in estimation of the commercials that might be coming up to make sure that you get as much bang for the buck as you can. I want to thank you for being here. If you want to know more, check out nikosrpg.com for our properties, and also check out our Patreon if you want to become a part of our community. That's patreon.com/NYCOS. I want to thank you again for being here, and I will see you in the next episode.